Hello, this is Einar Sørby from Unity Cloud. This is video number 2, it's part 2. I recommend you to find part 1 and look at that first. It's the same text, same heading, just look for part 1. I recommend you to look at this is an interview with Howdie Mickoski, and we're talking about his book, Falling for Truth, a Spiritual Death and Awakening. This is what we're talking about, and part number 1 was lots of interesting questions, and this part is going to continue what we have already started with. So in the last...
I thought I would share one piece before we really begin, and that was reminding what we're doing, or why I even write the book, or why I share this stuff now is not because I want anyone to believe what I believe, or not that I want anyone to think like I think, or that I want them to have the same answer I have. I just want them to start digging into areas and subjects and questionings that a person, particularly a spiritual seeker, has probably never looked into. Because to me now, those are the most important areas. Those are the areas that actually will create movement and growth and knowledge, and the things that the seeker normally looks at doesn't go very far. So the hope is that the subjects we touch upon are things you out there want to examine yourself. Yeah.
Yes. And the first part, we ended it a little bit in the middle of a question about kind of self-development. If you've been living your life just happy, easygoing, you usually go out screaming into death. And can you start from there again about why is it important to look at yourself, look at death?
Again, from the experience of death that I had, it's hard to study death until you've in some way died, of course, but you can try to do the best you can to study it without dying. But really, the knowledge you seek of truth is on the other side of death. That death is your barrier, and the challenge is you have to cross that barrier, get some of the knowledge directly, and return. You don't want to just cross death and die. You want to cross death first and return, and that requires a tremendous amount of energy. Like, you need an unbelievable inner power to do that, to start with. That's a lot of what a lot of spiritual practices are, things that are listed as spiritual exercises. They're really only for one purpose. That's to generate energy in the body, to reduce things that are wasting your energy, so that if you can get lucky and have an experience where you can cross death, you have the energy to do it. So that's the one part of where death brings in the knowledge. The second part is when the physical being will actually die, when this body ceases to be in this dream reality. What is going to happen? And the information that I've been getting now is that some really interesting, I don't want to call them choices because that's not the right word, some really interesting temptations are going to come up to you on the other side of death. And if you're not prepared for those temptations, and if you're not prepared for what's going to be there, the temptation will draw you in, and almost like a doorway will be missed. In ancient Egypt, they wrote an entire series of texts. They're known as the Book of Caverns and the Book of Gates. Those two books are all about how to navigate after you die. What's normally called the Book of the Dead, that's actually a book for life. That's a book of living in this reality. Those two others are for after death. And the other famous text, the pyramid text, I think that's for if you have an awakening in this reality, how you deal with awakening afterwards. So each of those main ancient Egyptian texts are about a key component of this work. Yeah.
So life is really preparing for death.
Right.
But can you explain that?
Technically, that's all it is.
Yeah.
Actually.
But when you're gonna die in the life, can you? I think I'm not sure what you mean about dying in this life.
Well, just again, like we talked about, when I realized in that canyon that the thing I've always thought of myself is not really me. That it's just a character. It's a character in a video game. It's basically what it is. And eventually, the game ends. Either the character dies in the game or doesn't. And the question is, well, what's left? What's still continuing afterwards that is in some way personalized, that is in some way still has awareness when the physical body is no longer present? And we've had everyone, or not everyone, many people have had glimpses of this when things like when you have an out-of-body experience perhaps and see your physical form sleeping, or I've had the opposite. I've had the out-of-body experience and seeing my physical form active. So it happened when I was awake, not sleeping. So there was like, two of me physically active at the same time in the same place. And these begin to get you to wonder, well, which one is me? Am I the physical body, or am I the awareness that seems to be bodiless but is seeing the thing that is my body? And all of those parts of it are designed to really get us to start questioning then, who or what is this thing that is aware? Who or what is this thing that is seeing and observing and experiencing what's going on around us? So part of all the work is start to ask, okay, when the physical body ceases, what's left? And normally everybody has an answer, right? They instantly have an answer, whether it's a religious answer, whether it's a spiritual answer, whether it's an answer that makes them feel good and they don't have to think about it anymore. I'm a higher self, I'll return to God, Jesus will take care of me, I'll become a Buddha, I will, there'll be something, some answer. But they don't know that. They don't know. They believe it and they have faith in it, and maybe it's true, but they don't know. The difference is what is it like to live life if you know? If you actually know that you've crossed death completely and have returned, because it's one thing, to find out you're just a character in a video game is pretty shocking, actually. It's why anyone who's had a real awakening should for a while be very confused. Because for all of our life, this has been a very serious place. Things are important. We have to do this. I have to improve. I have to gain. I have to get better. I have to, I'm not good enough. But all of a sudden, when you find your character in a video game, how can it matter? If you're successful or you fail, it's all the same. At some point, the person playing the game will just push reset and start again. And this will be very, very strange for a lot of people, but I have a real problem when people talk and focus on past lives. This idea that I was somebody else in the past, which in fact may be true. I'm not disputing that might be part of the story. But the weird thing that I found in my experiences was that I've had multiple lives in this body. So this is not the only Howdie Mickoski life that's going on. I've seen hundreds of them, and maybe thousands or millions, which would make sense. If you are a creator and you're creating a world, particularly if the world is a type of simulation or experiment, which I think this is, then I would not want Einar Sorbet to live one life. Your experiences are limited. But if I could give Einar Sorbet 1 million lives, now we've got some really interesting stuff. So there's some lives you died early, some lives you died late, some lives you're really successful, some you're a failure, so it actually takes some pressure off you, because if things aren't going well in this life, you know that, but there has to be other lives where it is going well. So it's a really, and like I say, I've had the experience of myself dying in other lives, which I talk about in the book, this experience of seeing myself die in a car crash in another life and realizing that that's a real experience. As real as the experience I'm having now, that was a real experience in another life. And that starts to change you. And again, I'm not saying to believe what I say, I'm saying to think about it. What if there's multiple lives that you live in this reality?
Can this be also not lives in this century, but also lives from 1,000 years ago?
Yeah, so again, once you start thinking of that, so here's one of the things I always found interesting, which changes some of this. Normally when somebody talks about a past life, they're always somebody special in a past life. I'm Cleopatra, I'm a king, I'm a queen, I'm whatever. Most people are not the crazed, psycho killer killing millions of people. But once you begin to step out and realize it's all a simulated illusion and you are all parts of it, that means if I'm not tapping into a past life mind personally, I'm tapping into just a general past life, which is it is mine because I'm the only thing here. So it becomes interesting that yes, you can say I was Cleopatra in a past life. Yes, of course, you had to be because you are everything. If you are everything, then you are every past life. So the trick, I think, is not to personalize it when you step into one, but instead to recognize, to take this to the next level, the bigger picture of, wow, what if every life? What if every life that's ever existed is me? And every life in the past has also had millions of experiences of. So think of that, of the potential experience you have access to if you can tap into this everything, because that means every experience of every being that's ever existed, you in some way have access to. That's massive when you think about it. You know?
Is this, when you're talking about this, everything, but also other planets, maybe you're on other planets also. But I'm thinking about what people talk about God. Is that this big everything? Is that what people calls?
I don't know. It's hard because it's a word. Right? It's a word like awakening. You can ask 10 people what that is, 10 spiritual people what that means, and you'll get 10 different answers. So having something with a label like that is really difficult. Because as soon as you say that word, everyone watching this has an opinion of what you just said.
Yes.
All that I can say is there seems to be an absolute nothingness that contains everything. Within the nothingness is a spark in which manifestation begins, and then comes a thing that is in charge of the manifestation. And I think what most people think of as God, the way that it's described by most people, whether they're religious or non-religious, they're talking about that. They're talking about the thing that actually puts creation in motion. But I feel there are we'll call it an experience or a knowing further than that. That even to reach what would be classified as God is still an experience in the dream. It would be a very fine layer of the dream, but it's still in the dream. There's a layer even beyond that. And that's hard to conceptualize because you can't.
Yeah. What do you think about the religions then?
Generally, if you pick up the text and realize that it doesn't matter what text you've got, it's been revised multiple times. But there is something in all of them. There is something there. Bizarrely, if you've had an awakening experience, a true awakening experience, then you can go back to religious texts and you can start zipping through it real fast. Oh yeah, this stuff is good, this stuff is good, this stuff is waste of time, this is stupid, this is good. You can begin to literally define it. And I think what happened is you've got an experience of an individual who or individuals who did see part of true reality, but it didn't take long for that person's experience to get, what's the word I'm looking for, marketed. And religion becomes a giant marketing tool. And the real message that's at the bottom of it gets lost. And it then begins to become a way for the people who are closest to that core to get control over others. But it doesn't have to be that way. If the message at the core can be freed, you might say, all the trappings dropped and the core message is left, then you've got something really powerful. But then if that happens, people will lose their specialness. I'm in the right one. Or they lose that safety. Religion is a thing that gives people comfort. It makes them feel, we were talking about death, it makes them feel that when they die, they're going to in some way be looked after. Based on how they live. Based on, this set of rules that either they've been given or they believe themselves, that'll be okay. Everything will be fine. And if your life is hard, and people on this planet have hard lives, I think for the average person who's actually lucky enough to be sitting at home just watching this, I think it's hard for you to realize how difficult, let's say 50% of the people's lives on this planet are. It's awful, almost, what they live. So religion in some way for them gets them to continue living. It gets them through the day. It gets them to actually survive the experience and get to tomorrow. So in a sense, that's why I don't want to just crap on it right away, because it serves a purpose. It serves a purpose. The problem is once you want, if something inside says, I want proof. I'm not gonna live this on faith. I'll experience it, but I want to prove it. And now it starts to fall apart. Now the message falls apart.
Yes.
And so that's what talks like this are for. And again, what happens when you start saying, I want proof?
But do you think the different religions for modern people is maybe something that keeps you from self-development?
Again, they're designed so that people can get along with each other.
And this is were thousands of years ago.
But still today, it's still the way people think about how to behave in life. You know, a Buddhist, even if they're a minor practicing Buddhist, still lives their life a particular way. A Christian lives their life a particular way. Someone in Islam lives their life a particular way. And a part of that way is how to get along with other people, how to supposedly not be making life worse for others. That's a component of every modern religion as it is right now, right? It tends not to happen like that, but that's the message. And so if you're actually following that message, that's not a bad thing. So that's why we can't just attack them on the surface, because they have a role. They have a role. But they're also part of the prison. They're also part of the trapping into reality in various ways, and it doesn't matter, there's thousands of traps, it's just one of them. And so, yeah, it becomes a tricky thing to unwind something from somebody, no matter what it is, whatever the belief structure they have, to get them to start seeing something truer and deeper and more powerful about themselves, where you don't need something external to define you or to give you your power. That comes internally from yourself. And that's when you have your own internal power that can't be taken away, that's your own, is something that you have found that you didn't have to develop. It was there from the moment you were created. It'll be there the moment you're gone. When you have access to that power, you are now centered, and you are a very unique being in this place. Yeah.
One thing you wanted to talk about is what you can do. What can I do for self-development, training, or?
Okay, there's a really good question. What do you do, Einar? Like yesterday, what did you do? What did you do from the standpoint of what you said, spiritual development? What did you do yesterday?
Well, my ways of working with myself, I'm very lazy, but I look at whenever I feel something or do something, I go back I try to call it maybe my higher self, to why did I do that? Why did I feel that? And then I try to look at it and try to understand why I was doing that.
Okay, so a form of like observation.
Observation.
Type of observation. I would actually classify that as something, yes, everybody should be doing as much as possible, even though most people don't do it correctly. Because observation is getting to a point where you're able to be a totally unjudging witness, where you're seeing the mind, you're seeing the thoughts, you're seeing everything, and you're not judging it good or bad. You're just seeing it, and you're wondering, where does that come from? Where did that thought come from? Where did that action come from? Where did that... Because if you try to look for where anything originates, you can't find it. Like look for any thought. Where does it come from? You don't know. So that level of observation is really powerful. But then there's all these other things. Like now, I don't practice that much anymore. I don't do that much on a daily basis. But before I had my canyon experience, before I fell into the river, had the death experience, I was probably putting in 12 hours a day. That would be Qigong, I was doing that for an hour at least a day. I was doing a walking meditation, which was designed to test reality. I wasn't trying to be peaceful, I was trying to actually see what reality would be like if I stopped thinking. And I would do that by walking, often an hour or two a day. I would be gazing, where you would stare at an object for hours to see what would happen if it changes, when that would happen. I would be doing other building energy exercises. I would be doing dreaming exercises at night. I was doing my recapitulation exercises, going over my entire life in the course of the evening. I would be, so there were these constant parts. It was like there was no part of my day that I considered that was not spiritual practice. If I was standing in the line waiting for coffee, there's something I could be doing in that line. If I was talking to a friend on the phone, there's something I can be doing in that moment. So no one is going to be that dedicated, certainly not at the beginning. So my recommendation this is my recommendation for anybody, is choose one thing that you're currently not doing now, one exercise or practice or whatever, and make a commitment to do it for 7 days. That's all. 7 days. Make it as simple as you want. It can literally be as simple as I'm going to eat a good breakfast every morning for 7 days, and then do it. Whatever it takes, you will do that for 7 days. What you're doing is you're building power. Commitment builds power. And it doesn't matter so much what the practice is, it's that you will be committed and you will do it and you will complete it, because then you can say, I'm going to now make a bigger practice. I'm going to do something larger. I'm going to do something bigger. I'm going to do something more compelling for the world. And if you can prove you can do the small ones, you can do the big ones. And that's why people have so much trouble, for example, kicking an addiction. Because they can't start with something. Don't start with stopping the addiction. Start with something really small, really simple. Start there. Prove that you can live up to your word, and then a little harder, a little harder, a little harder. And then when it's time to say, well, now I'm going to stop drinking, you will, because you proved you can do all the other ones. So that would be my place to start. Make a commitment. It doesn't have to be big, but hold up to it. And the more you learn how to hold up to your commitments, the more power you get. Commitment is power, beyond power. As soon as you say you will do something, you're going to do it. Einar said he was coming today at 1 o'clock, and no matter what happened, we were going to be here at 1 o'clock to do this talk. I could not cancel it. I could not say, something else has come up, I don't want to do it now, I'm sick. No matter what, I have to be here and do the talk as I said I would. That's power. Because as soon as you can I'll explain why now. Because as soon as you can start saying no, as soon as something can come up and make you break your commitment to anything, now the universe knows, if I just throw him that problem again, he'll say no. And Richard Rose, one of the men I write about in my book, whose foundation is the TAP Foundation, who printed the book, and I'm really grateful for them, he was a component of commitment. And he learned it because when he first started doing talks, he did a talk every Friday night. And every Friday night, one of his wife or one of his kids would get sick, and he had to start canceling. And finally one day he just said, I don't care if you're dying of gunshot wounds on the floor, and this is going to be the end of your life, I'm going to do my talk. Guess what? They stopped being sick. Just like that. That once he proved that his commitment was beyond what the universe could do to thwart him, then the universe stopped. And a lot of problems in your life, not all, because some problems you're going to have to get, but a lot of problems get solved just because when you say yes, you do it. And if you're not ready to say yes, your answer is no. Now, how many times, you're going to come to my party Saturday? Oh, sure, I'll come to the party Saturday. You know you're not going. You know you just don't want to be honest. You just don't want to be honest and say, I don't want to go to your party, or I've got something else. So now you're stuck, and now you're caught in a lie. Because now you've got to come up with, how do I either tell them, something's come up, I've got to make up an excuse, I've got to lie, or now maybe you go and you're going to hate it, as opposed to, my answer is yes, so I'm going. Even if something better comes up, it's too bad. I should have thought about my choice before. And if I say no, then it's comfortable. It's just no. It's not. It could be yes later on, but now it's no. So that is power. That is power.
So honesty is
an honesty and a willingness to once you say yes, Because you're not really saying, the yes you say to in the physical world is a small yes. The real yes you're saying to is a spiritual yes. That yes to, I want the truth. I want to know the truth of myself or death or whatever, and by proving you can hold your commitment and not back down in this world, because whatever problems you're going to get in this world are nothing to what you're going to face in the spiritual world if you want the truth. This is not a place where you might say souls can leave easily. The whole place is designed to keep you here, to keep this reality turning, to keep the karmic wheel going. And if you want to get out of that, you're going to be challenged. And so you have to have an unbelievable commitment to that answer for it to happen. And you start with commitments here. That's why it's power. And it's anyone who has done it can speak about it. And if you haven't done it, try it. Honestly, try it. Make some commitments for 2 or 3 weeks and see if things change in your life. I almost guarantee something will, because of the power you're putting into yourself. It's not an external power, it's a self. Commitment, and I keep it. Yeah, powerful. I wished I knew it when I was 14. My life would have been totally different.
Yeah. Hope some people take what you're saying here then. But one thing you just said, karma. That's kind of energy everybody's talking about. Can you explain it? What do you mean about karma?
As I understand what it really is, I understand it as a perpetuating wheel. That it's just creating the next experience from the last experience by a form of keeping it alive. That karma will stop. The idea of creating more and more, usually it's thought of somehow as you've done something in the past, and that experience influences what comes in the future. The better things are, the nicer you were in the past. The worse things are, the worse you were, right? That's the general idea of it. As opposed to, it doesn't matter what the thing is in the past you're linking to, it's going to generate something in the future, in a sense, to keep the past alive. The past is only alive if you can think about it. If you lose all thought of the past, does it exist? Like, there's a good thing. If you have an experience of your past that you can't remember anymore, well, did it really happen? And I don't mean from the standpoint of denial or blocking or whatever, like the subconscious still remembers. I mean literally on all levels of your being. If that experience is literally erased, did it exist? So to me, karma is the continuing of creating, manifesting experiences of which the design is to keep you in the world believing that you are Einar Sorbet, having this particular life with this history, with this past and this future and these hopes and these goals. And when you're off the karmic wheel, you are now, or the universe is free to do whatever the hell it wants. The universe is the universe, and everything in it can totally be itself. I don't need to make it any different, and I don't need to justify it from my past.